Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode in the Scratch Scrolling Tile Game Tutorial series. This episode is super exciting because we are going to be adding the procedurally generated world generation. Wait, no, because we're going to be adding procedural world generation to this project. So, you know, it'll generate the dirt and the ores and the trees and the bushy things, not bushes, what are they called? And it'll also generate bedrock and all the different stuff. There's a lot of stuff I don't remember. Man, I'm bad at intro. So if that seems like something you're interested in making, then make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing, and also leave a comment down below. But anyway, let's get right into this tutorial. Woo! Okay, so I have one new sprite called loading, and this is going to be the loading screen. Wow. And within it I have a costume called loading main, which is just a cool loading screen. Loading main 2, which is just the loading text with 2 dots. Loading 3, which is just it with 1 dot. Loading progress, which is just a 480 pixel wide bar thing. And then those two sprites were just sprites I used to make the background here, and I deleted them because you don't need them. Okay, so inside the tile manager, as you can see here, I've cleared out the crate grid list. It's just a plain repeat world width. Let's go ahead and make bedrock generate. So make a for the sprite only variable called generation bedrock thickness and click OK. Now go ahead and set the generation bedrock thickness to pick random 1 to 2. So that means that the bedrock will be either 1 tile high or 2 tiles high. Now all we need to do to make the bedrock generate is repeat the generation bedrock thickness, add the ID of bedrock to tile grid, which let me check here, I believe it is 2, as you can see here. So we'll just add 2 to tile grid. Now we need to fill up the rest of the world, so go ahead and repeat the world height, which is the amount of tiles in the world, then subtract from that new variable we just made, generation bedrock thickness, and put that in the repeat. And now go ahead and add 3, which is the stone ID. Okay, so now if we go ahead and start the game, ooh, look at that, we have bedrock on the bottom of the world. Wow, there we go, we made Minecraft. Goodbye, subscribe. No, just kidding. Let's make the top of the world have air on it, so that way it's not just a solid stone at the top, if that makes any sense. So to do this, we need to make a for the sprite only variable called generation air amount, and make sure that's for the sprite only. So now at the very top, let's set the generation air amount to pick random 8 all the way up till 20. Let's make the air amount go up or down each time we generate a vertical slice of the world. So we want to add an if statement checking if pick random 1 to 3 is equal to 1. So that means that the generation has a 1 in 3 chance to change the height of the world. Now add an if else checking if the generation air amount is less than 5. So that means that we have less than 5 air tiles for that slice. If we do, we need to make the world have more air, that way we don't have hills clipping at the top of the world. So we can change the air amount by 1. Else we can duplicate this and check if the air amount is greater than 20. That means that we have too much air. We need to go ahead and change the air amount by -1, so that way it takes back some of the air so it doesn't go too deep into the world. And if we're not clipping out of our bounds, which are 5 and 20, then we can just change it by random amount. So just do change air amount by pick random. I can't type. I really can't type. -1. Oh my. -1 to 1. So now we have this really crazy looking thing. So let's go ahead and actually use that. So instead of repeating the world height and then subtracting the bedrock thickness, we need to count for the air amount as well. Add the air amount to the bedrock thickness. Now at the very bottom, all we need to do is repeat the air amount, add 1, I think, to tile grid, which is the air. Yep, 1 is air. Okay, so if we've done everything correctly, if we go to the very top of the world, hold up, this is gonna take too long. Let me make us faster. I'll change these to 25 in the player. If I zoom to the top of the world, yes, look at this, we have a nice hills and stuff, and the air is spawning, and it never gets too deep or too high. It kind of just floats up and down, which is great. Really quick, to save time, I'm gonna go ahead and pull a set and then scroll Y to, and let's see what the scroll Y is. It's 7,800. So let's go ahead and do 7,700, like so. So now whenever we click the green flag, we can set the scroll Y all the way up there and see what the top of the world looks like. Awesome. So really quick, just to demonstrate, I'm gonna change this 3 to like a 6. You can see now, if I go to the top of the world, it should be a lot smoother. Yep, as you can see, it does not change as much because it's a much rarer chance for it to do all this stuff, which changes the air amount. I found that 3 looks pretty nice for the size of our world. Now this is getting a wee bit messy, so let's go ahead and separate these chunks out into their own little custom block, and that'll also allow us to make it much more performant and let us do the loading screen, because right now we just have the parent custom block running without screen refresh. refresh, which will make it happen instantly. And once we get more complex world generation, it's going to lag out the game like crazy. So instead, what we want to do is just make the vertical slices generate instantly, and then make the world width only generate not instantly. So I'll show you what I mean. Go ahead and right click on the create list grid and uncheck this run without screen refresh and click OK. Now make a custom block called generate bedrock. Make sure you click on run without screen refresh and pull that down. Now let's go ahead and make another one called generate stone layer, which is just the layer that contains the ores and the stone and all that stuff. Make sure you also click run screen without refresh, put that under here. And now we need one more called generate AIR, and make sure you click run screen without refresh. Now we can actually move the code in here. So this is the bedrock code, this is the stone layer code, and last but not least, this stuff is the air code. Now we need to actually run those. So at the very bottom here, generate the bedrock first, then the stone layer, then the air layer. And as you can see now, you can see it generating each slice of the world, which is really cool. And we'll hide that later with the loading screen. Okay, so now let's make a for the sprite only variable called generation dirt thickness, like so, and click OK. Now at the very top here, go ahead and set that generation dirt thickness to a random amount between 20 and 22. And now we need to go ahead and do what we did for the other ones and make a custom block called generate dirt layer and click run without screen refresh and put that right after the stone layer, and make sure you run the generate dirt layer right after the stone. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and repeat generation dirt thickness amount -1. Now you may be wondering why we're going to do it -1. That's because at the very bottom we want room for adding a grass tile, like the actual grass like this. So that's why we're subtracting 1 from it. Now we're just going to add the ID of the dirt, which is 4, as you can see. And then after we done the dirt, we can add 5, which is the grass tile. Okay, so now we need to actually factor in the dirt thickness in the world height here. So add to the bedrock thickness plus air amount, like so, the generation dirt thickness, and now put that back. Hopefully, if we've done everything correctly, here we go, you see the world generating. Wait for this grass tile to turn to bedrock or whatever tile it is. That means it's completed generating. Now if we go to the very top of the world, oh yes, here we go, look at this. You can see that we have some dirt, and if we go even higher, hopefully, yep, there we go, we have the grass top, which is awesome, and you can see it's starting to resemble a world. That is actually really cool. Look at that. Okay, something that's really bothering me is the air is not transparent, so let's do that real quick. So make a custom block called Tile VFX, like so, and click OK. Now go ahead and run that at the very bottom here. This will also handle the lighting later on, but we're not going to get to that today. Now all you need to do is check if the item tile list ID of grid equals to 1, which is the air. Then we can go ahead and set the ghost effect to 100%, which will make it invisible, and then otherwise set it to 0. Now the reason we're not showing and hiding is because if we hide it, then it will break the whole looping system. I'll go ahead and set the scroll wide to 7,000 so I can teleport to the top of the world, and you can see now that, look at this, the air tiles are transparent. What I mean by that is you can see straight through them. If I go ahead and go into the backdrop and just draw a squiggle, you can actually see the backdrop through those tiles, but it still counts if there's a tile here. It's just transparent, so that is great. Okay, so now that we have that little thing worked on, let's go ahead and start adding in the ores. Okay, so this works a little bit differently from what you might expect. So when we're actually doing the first world generation pass here, doing all this stuff, we're just going to add a singular tile called like generate whatever it is, hole. And then after we've done all this generation, we'll loop through the whole entire world and check if the current tile it's looping through is equal to the, say, generate coal ore. Then it'll replace a bunch of surrounding tiles with the correct ores and stuff. But that'll all be contained in a custom block, and it'll do automatically. So let's go ahead and actually do that. So inside the generate stone layer, what we want to go ahead and do is add an if else in here and check if pick random 1 to 2 is equal to 1. So this has a 1 in 2 chance to spawn an ore. If it is, then we'll do blank. Otherwise, we'll move this generate stone into the else. Now we want to go ahead and add an if else and check if pick random 1 to 80 is equal to 1. Then we can go ahead and add generate silver ore to the tile grid. You want to go from the rarest to the least rarest. Then if pick random 1 to 75 is equal to 1, then we can add generate gold ore to list. And the reason that silver ore is rarer than gold, even though gold is better, is because silver ore spawns in bigger veins. And now in the otherwise, go ahead and add pick random 1 to 45, do generate copper ore, duplicate this in the else. If pick random 1 to 20 is 1, then add generate coal ore, like so. Otherwise, if none of those are true, then just add the stone stone. Okay, so now really quick to test this out, we can't actually see them because we don't have a tile named like generate color or whatever it is. So all we need to do is check if the apple contains A inside the position tiles. Instead of apple, the item tile list of ID contains gen. Make sure that you started all these with generate. Then if it does, then we can go ahead and switch costume to, we can do 12 because that's the torch. That way we can see it compared to everything else. So you can now see that after the world is done generating, random torches are sprinkled throughout. And those stand for the generate blocks. So that means that our generating ore function is working. So you can go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, let's do the same exact thing for the trees. We need to do the same thing where we add the generate tree and all that stuff, because later we'll loop through the whole thing and then generate the trees when necessary. However, trees are a little more complex because we don't want two trees spawning right next to each other and they have random heights and all that stuff. So we need to make a custom block called generate tree key like so and run without screen refresh. Up here, we'll run generate tree key right before the air. Okay, so now we need a variable called generation just made tree, and that's for the sprite only. Now we can go ahead and check if the generation just made tree is equal to 0. So this will basically be a number that each time we generate a tree, it'll set it to like 5, and then once it moves a tile to the right, it'll reduce that, so that way there's a 5 tile spacing in between each tree. So change this to an if else, otherwise we'll change it by -1. So if it's possible to generate a tree if pick random 1 to 4 is equal to 1. First, let's go ahead and set the generation just made tree to 5 so it starts the cooldown again, and then we'll just add generate tree to tile grid. Now in the very beginning here, we need to go ahead and set the generation just made tree to 0. So now we need to compensate for the tile that we took up with the generate tree tile. So we just need to take out the right amount from the air, depending on if we made a tree or not. So just do repeat generation air amount in the generate air custom block minus just made tree equals to 5, which remember we set it to 5 here, so make sure this number matches this number. If we generated a tree, then we can just subtract that. So you may be wondering, how do we subtract that? That doesn't make sense. So basically, if this is true, it'll be 1. If it's 0, it's false. Okay, so to make sure that this is working, let's go ahead and go all the way up here and add an if statement and check if the item tile list ID equals the generate tree. Then we can go ahead and switch costume to the 12 again, which is a torch. That way we can tell if it's working. Hopefully, yes, look at this. Randomly, there's torches, which will stand for the trunk of the tree, but they're not close together, which is great. So that means that this is working. Now really quick, just to make this a little cleaner, let's make a variable called min tree spacing. And now check if the generate just made tree is equal to the min tree spacing. And then in the generate tree key, we can set the generate just made tree to the minimum tree spacing. Now in the very beginning here, we can go ahead and set the minimum tree spacing to 5, and that'll work exactly the same. If we change this value to like 9 or something and restart the game, you should see that the trees are much farther apart. There we go. You can see that they're much farther. And I want mine to be 5. So now that we know all the generation keys are working, we can get rid of this if here. We need to generate the clay and tin inside the dirt, which don't need the ore keys here because they are just one tile ores. So inside the generate dirt layer, what we can go ahead and do is add an if else in here and check if pick random 1 to 25 is equal to 1, then we'll add 15 to tile grid, which is the ID of 10. Else, if pick random 1 to 7 is equal to 1, then we'll add 11 to tile grid, which is clay. Otherwise, if none of that's true, then we'll add 4, which is just the dirt. So now if we go ahead and start this game, wait for the world to be done generating, once this dirt tile disappears, and we go to the very top of the world, here we go, look at this, there's random clay patches, and there's tin all over. Now there's one more thing I'd like to do. Right now, all the ores have the same chance to spawn at any place in the world. That means that you can't add the depth you want it to be able to spawn at. So say you want silver to spawn deeper, well right now you can't do that. So we need to make some changes to the system. So make a for the sprite only variable called current gen y like so, and now click OK. Now in the beginning here, right underneath here, set that to 0. So each time it creates a vertical slice, it'll set it to 0 and then change it by 1 for each tile it goes up. Now we need to change it by 1 each time we add something to the list, and we we have a lot of places we add it to, so it'd be easier to make a custom block. That way we don't have to remember to add it each time. So make a custom block called add tile with a colon, then input ID, and then a label to lit, and click OK. Now in that block here, all we need to do is add the ID to tile grid, and then change the current gen Y by 1. So that'll make it loop up 1. Now we just need to go through all the places we have this add to tile grid and replace it with this custom block. So I'll start at the very top here and change this to add to list, remove that, duplicate this, and now we can just copy and paste that in like so. And now we just need to do the same thing for this guy, the same exact thing for this one, same exact thing for the color. Go ahead and do 3 here, 3 there as well. Now for the dirt, we can go ahead and add 15 here, 11 here, remove the old one, 4 here, and then 5 here. For the air, it's really easy, just add 1 here, and here is just generate tree. So as you can see now, we've replaced all of those with the custom block add tile. So if we've done everything correctly, if we start the world, everything should work exactly the same. You can see that there's stone, there's bedrock at the bottom. If we go all the way to the top of the world, here we go, all the tiles are still here, there's a grass at the top, and everything is working correctly. So now we can actually use that current gen Y to our advantage. So for this silver ore, I can check pick random 1 to 80, and current gen Y is less than 100. So that means that it can only generate below half of the world. Now do the same thing for this one, do an and here, and check if the current gen Y is less than 50 for the generate gold ore. So that's very close to the bottom of the world. Add an and to the copper ore here, check if current gen Y is less than 160. So that's more close to the surface, but still deeper. And then for the coal, we really don't care, it can spawn anywhere in the world. We'll have to wait until we finish the ore generation to see if that worked or not. So now let's actually make the ores spawn the ore chunks, and the trees spawn the trees, and all of that stuff. So let's start with the ores. Go ahead and make a custom block called generate ores and run without screen refresh here. And make sure you run that generate ores outside of the loop here, because we want it to happen after we've done the base world generation. Now we need to make a custom block that'll actually generate the specific ore feature. So add a custom block called generate ore feature with a colon like so, and then type key with a colon, and an input called key. I'll explain what that does in a second. A label called tile ID with a colon, and then an input called ID. Now we need to specify the sizing. So make a label called size min x with a colon, then input called size min x, then a label size max x with a colon, and then an input called size max x. Now we need to do the y, so do size min y with a colon, then input size min y, a label called size max y with a colon, and then an input size max y. And make sure you click run screen without refresh and click OK. So now we have this big chunky boy of a block that contains the key, the ID, the minimum x, minimum y, and maximum y for the size. Now in the generate ores, we can pull out the generate ore feature. So we will run this block for each ore type. So how this works is the key is what tile ID it's looking for. For instance, for the silver ore, it would be the key generate silver ore. So that'll be the tile it's looping through the world and looking for. Then the tile ID is the tile it replaces it as. So for silver, it would be 18 because that's silver. And then the size is kind of self-explanatory. That's the size of the ore. So let's do the coal first. Copy this generate coal ore into the key, and now replace that with tile ID of 16, because you can see that the coal is number 16. Then for the size min x is 1, so it can be a minimum of 1 wide. Then for max x, it can be 2. Then the y is also 1 and 2. So it can be anywhere from 1 thick to 2 thick, or 1 high and 2 high. So now let's make the generate ore feature actually work. First, let's actually check if the tile list actually has the key we're looking for. So just check if the tile grid contains the key. So if it does actually have this generate coal ore in it, we can go ahead and make a new variable called tile index and set that tile index here to 0. Now we go on to repeat until not tile list contains the key. So we'll do this until we replace all of the keys in the list. We'll change tile index by 1, so it loops through the next one. Then we want to check if item 1 of tile grid and change this to the item tile index of tile grid equals the key. So if the current tile we are looping over is the key, then we need to generate the ore. So make a for the sprite only variable called generation value, click OK, and make another one for the sprite only called generation generation value 2. These will just be some temporary values we can use. Set the generation value to 0 here and repeat pick random 1 to 10 and change this to size minimum on the left and size maximum Y on the right. Make sure those are both the Y one. Then we replace the item 1 of tile grid with thing and change this to tile index plus that generation value of tile grid with the ID, which is the final tile we are replacing with. Then we want to set the generation value 2 to 1. Now we'll generate the X part of it. So repeat pick random size minimum X to size maximum X. Duplicate this code here and put that in there. Pull out all the plus in there and add generation value to the right. Then a plus in here and add the tile index on the left. Then add a times here and take the world height times the generation value 2, which is the thickness of it. Then after that, repeat until we can go ahead and change the generation value by 1. So if we've done everything correctly, this should work. So if we start the game, wait for a second, look at this, we have ore generating and it is random size between the sizes we set. So now that we have this set up, it's super easy to add new ores. All we need to do is duplicate this and fill in the value. So we can go ahead and copy the generate copper ore here and then set the final tile ID to 17 because that's the ID of copper, the size min X to 2, size max X to 5, the size min Y to 1, and the size max Y to 1 as well. So this is a good horizontal ore. Then generate silver ore and the ID for that is 18. Size min X and max X are both 5. Then the size min Y and max Y are 2. Last but not least, we can go ahead and copy the generate gold ore, which is the final one. The ID for that is 19. The min X is 3 and the max X is 8. The size min and max Y are 1. So now if we click on the green flag, if we wait a bit, you should see that hopefully some ores pop in. Oh, look at that. Ores are generating. And once it's done, you can see that there's ore veins all around. For some reason, the copper is only spawning 2 wide, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. Okay, I figured it out. I'm dumb. So I forgot to add in the inside repeat loop, you need to subtract 1 from here. I messed another thing up. This right here needs to be a change. If we generate the world, now the ores should be different widths. Yes, look at that. The width is finally working. You can see that there's thin coal and there's also 4 wide copper. Same with the silver, there's wide silver and they're really wide gold as well. So now the ore generation is fully working. You can see that all of them have their own custom sizes that we inputted. To add a new ore, all I need to do is add an if else in here, put that in here, duplicate all this, and I'm going to take out the height limit so it can be at any height in the world, and I'll do pick random 1 and 80, sure. And I'll add generate test to list. Now in the generate ores, we'll go ahead and add another one of these, copy the generate test inside of here. For the tile ID, I'll go ahead and make it generate ladder. So if that's 14. So I'll do tile ID 14. The minimum is going to be 6, the max 6, the size min Y is going to be 7, and the max Y is going to be 9. I don't know, I'm just putting random numbers in there. So if we go ahead and start the world now, as you can see here, after it's done lagging, we should find random huge ladder veins of ore, and they follow the size that we put in here, which is great. So you can see how expandable this is. I'll remove the test thingy here. Okay, so now we need to do the same exact thing for the trees. So make a custom block called generate trees, like so. Click run without screen refresh, and then generate trees at the very top here. Inside the generate trees, we want to do generate ores. It's going to generate the trees first, then the ores. So you can see now, if we start the game, everything should still work. Here's the ores. Duplicate this here, remove this right here, and now put that inside of here. And make sure you move the ores to the bottom. Now, instead of the key, because we don't have that, just replace all those with generate tree, like so. Generate tree, generate tree. Then we can go ahead and for now just replace index of tile ID with, let's go ahead and do 8. So if we go ahead and do that and start the game, here we go, look at that, there's stumps all around. Now let's make it generate the tree. So instead of this, we can go ahead and set generation value to 0, and now we can repeat pick random 2 to 6, and that's the height of the tree. Then we can go ahead and replace the item tile index plus the generation value with 8, which is the logs. Then we change the generation value by 1. So that will create the actual stumps. So now we can create the leaves. Duplicate this, and after the repeat here, replace tile index plus generation value with 10, which is the leaf log, which is the kind of mix between log and leaf. Duplicate this, and now add 1 to generation value and replace it with 10 as well. Duplicate that, add 2, and also do that. Then add 3 to it, add 9 to the generation value, add 4 to it, and add 9 as well, which is the leaves on top. Now we need to add the leaves to the right and left, so we can go ahead and do this right here, move the generation value over there, and put the world height right here. Now duplicate this, and then add 1 to the world generation value. And yes, look at this, we have some weird looking trees spawning, but they are random height, and they are looking correct. So these 3 right here are these ones right here. Then these 2 right here, the +3 and 4, are these guys. Then these 2 right here are these little stumps. If we duplicate this one and then do 2, it'll be right here. Then if we do +3, it'll be right here. So that's good. And then we need to do the same thing, but on this side. So you can go ahead and duplicate all 4 of those and just swap these plus here for a minus. So just go minus, 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 minus. These also need to be minus. So for these bottom 4 here, we need to change these to minuses. Yes, look at this. We have random trees all over. That looks great. Now some of them are sticking up, and that's going to cause a bug at the bottom of the world. So we need to go ahead and make the air a little bit more at the top of the world. So let's see, if the tree is 6 high, it will actually be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 high. So the minimum needs to be like 12 here. Also check right here if it's less than 12. So hopefully now we shouldn't see any weird tree clipping at the bottom of the world or anything like that. Here we go, all the bedrock looks normal, but if we go to the top of the world, here we go, we have randomly generated trees. Okay, so the last thing for the world generation that I kind of forgot about is the grass. So let's go ahead and do that. So add a custom block called add ground foliage, run screen without refresh. Now go ahead and make a variable called generation foliage for the sprite only. Now repeat the generation foliage, add tile, pick random 6 to 7 to list. 6 and 7 are the little bush thingies. And so now in the main loop here, you can set the generation foliage to pick random 0 to 1. So if it's 0, it won't generate, otherwise it'll generate. Now, after we generate the tree keys, we can generate the ground foliage. Then we need to also subtract if we have foliage or not from the air amount, just like we did the tree. So in the generate air, add onto this generate foliage. At the very top of the world, yep, everything's working. We have random little grass lumps on top of our ground, and it looks really cool now. So now we have a completely randomly generated world each time we play with ores and everything, and it's nice and expandable as well. Okay, so the last thing we need to do really quick is to make the world loading. So make a for all sprite variable called loading %, like so, and then another variable for the sprite only called loading terrain number. Set in the very beginning the loading number to 1. Then right here, change the loading number by 1. Now we just need to calculate from 0 to 100 the percentage of how far we're done loading. So this is actually just a simple math problem. All we need to do is take the load train number divided by the world width and take that times 100, so that way it's 0 to 100. If we go ahead and show the loading here, it's 0 in the beginning, and then as we go through, it goes all the way up to 100, and then it finishes the loading process. Awesome. So now we have a loading percentage, so we can actually use that in the loading screen. So now in the very top here, we can go ahead and do a winner receive generate world and put this inside of here. And now at the very bottom, all we need to do is wait until the loading % is greater than 99. So that means that we are done loading. Now in the loading screen, we can go ahead and do when green flag clicked, broadcast generate world, and wait. Then in the very top, we can show, and in the very bottom, we can hide. Make sure you go to front and just go to 0, 0 as well. So you can see now that the loading screen pops up in the very beginning, beginning, it just is kind of being laggy, and then once it's done, look at this, it hides and the world is completely done loading. And let's go ahead and move that generate world to a separate when green flag clicked. Then once it's done, we can go ahead and broadcast hide loading screen. Then in the hide loading screen, we can go ahead and repeat 10 times. Let's make it fade out. So just change the ghost effect by 10, stop other scripts and sprites, and make sure you clear the graphic effects up here. Then right here, we do when I receive generate world. Put the hide right there. So if we go ahead and do this now, once we're done loading, it should fade out. Yep, it fades out. Cool. Now we can actually animate this. So add a switch costume to loading progress forever, switch costume to loading progress 3, wait 0.5 seconds, loading 2, wait 0.5 seconds, loading main, wait 0.5 seconds, and then back to loading 2. You can see now that this looks nice because it just kind of bobs back and forth or whatever. And last but not least, let's make the progress bar. So right here, create a clone of myself, and then when I start as a clone, set the Y to -180 so it's at the bottom of the screen, and switch costume to loading progress, show and go to front. Now you can see that a bar pops up at the bottom of the screen. Awesome. Forever, set size to 10,000%, change the X by 10 for now, and set size back to 100. So now for the movement, we want to do a times 0.2 and then a minus. And now we put X position on the right. Now we just need to input the position we want it to go to. And that position is a minus block with 480 on the right, and then a times block and put loading times 4.8. So loading times 4.8 minus 480 minus X position times 0.2. So you can now see that in the beginning, here we go, it will slowly go up as we're loading, and then once it reaches the end after the little laggy bit, and that didn't quite work. And I'm going to go ahead and test something real quick. Let's move this hide loading screen into the tile manager and put it right here. So after the loading is greater than 999, we can hide the loading screen. Okay, so hopefully now if we start this game, it will work, and then once it reaches the end, there we go, it fades out and looks great. Okay, now that is awesome. Let's also delete this clone right here so it gets rid of the clone. And then in the beginning here, let's also just set the X to like -1 billion, and that'll just help it look better so it's over here. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Hit that like button and consider subscribing. But anyway, this has been Owen, and I am out.